Lions try to get the football back. Mayfield looking. Pressure comes as he throws it over the middle. Intercepted by the Lions. Picked off. Brian Branch up to make the grab, and the Lions have got the football back.
Welcome to week 3 of the NFL. This is the Twentyman the Huddle podcast. Week 3 already.
I know, man. It feels like it takes forever to get here and then over.
He is Justin Rogers, formerly of the Detroit News, now of the Detroit Football Network.
Correct.
I want to talk about that for just a second real quick before we get into our 3 keys to the game. But look, you covered this team for the Detroit News for a number of years, and
M Live before that.
You know, thought you were you had a value for your work. It wasn't matched, and to take that step to venture off into your own. How scary that probably was with 2 small kids and a wife. I got a lot of respect for that. Just kind of what went into that thought, and how's it going for you so far?
I explained to somebody the morning of launch, I had planned on launching at 8 in the morning. I woke up at 5 and said it was like 80% excitement and 20% sheer terror. I was able to sleep comfortably outside of that morning because I have a supportive wife that, gave me the runway to do this. And then I'm such a diligent planner. I kind of picked away at the idea for several months until, it became clear that that was the switch that I was going to flip. And so, I felt like I had everything in a row financially, in terms of all the boxes I needed to check. And look, I had, I think, modest goals to start. Had to reestablish them because I've hit so many of the early goals.
That's great.
It's been a really, really great experience. It's fully subscriber funded. I mean, the readers pay for my existence in this profession now, and to know that the support has been there has been very reassuring and humbling too.
And you're your own boss, which is the great part of the whole deal, isn't it?
I don't have any chill with that, so I push myself. My boss is a jerk.
All right. Well, it's doing. I'm glad it's doing great. It's another terrific resource for Lions fans out there. We'll put the website on the screen right there for you. And let's get into these 3 keys first off, because obviously 1-1. This is a big early game for Detroit. Last year, they stumbled week 2, were able to go into week 3, win a game, roll off 4 straight, and that kind of got rolling. You don't want this to steamroll the other way, though. So, obviously, I think one thing that needs fixing right away is number 1 key to this one is cleaning up the red zone. Yeah,
you look at this team, they were one of the best red zone teams last year, converted nearly 2/3 of their trips, maybe it was exactly 2/3 into touchdowns. Right now they're sitting at 26-27% after 1 for 7 showing against Tampa, and I think Tampa kind of unveiled a formula that challenges Detroit going forward. It was this rush 4, drop 7. I always have such a great appreciation of watching a great zone defense do what they're supposed to do, and they played it to perfection. They didn't get too deep. They kept eyes on everything shallow, limiting the yak, and Detroit couldn't come up with an answer. And so they've got to find a way, I think, to be more efficient with their run game. First of all, it starts with making those 2nd and 3rd and manageables. A lot of negative plays there, right, against Tampa, and then 2, finding ways to crack those zones, those almost prevent-esque zones in the red zone, because if you can't, teams are going to keep using that blueprint against you until you prove you can beat it.
That's the big point there, because now there's the film. Now there's the blueprint. Sure. You're going to see it. I think the Detroit's got to do much better in the seams, some of those quick hitters in the middle portion of the field. And that's a tough area because you got to get over the linebackers and inside, and there's not a lot of space to do that inside the defensive backs. But they've got to do a better job. I think Sam Laporta's got to be a little bit more key in the red zone. He was huge for them in the red zone last year. Hasn't been a big factor first 2 weeks. Now, look, there's lots of mouths to feed in this offense, so I understand it. But he's got to be a guy, to me, especially in the red zone, that's got to be a factor. You've got to target him 2, 3, 4 times in the red zone because he can make those plays for you. I think the disappointing thing that Dan Campbell brought up, too, about the red zone, it wasn't one thing. Justin, I think if it's one thing and you can look at it and be like, okay, that was the issue. But it was missed assignments. It was some missed blocks. It was some bad play calls. It was some bad reads. Yep. I mean, it was a little bit of everything, and I think when you watch the tape, that's probably the little bit of a frustrating thing for Dan Campbell. But when the guys watch it, they're like, okay, I think we can fix that stuff because it wasn't just one issue, even though that's frustrating. I think individually guys can clean that up and they can be better there.
Yeah, I think going back to what Tampa did that maybe took it away was they really put emphasis on the flats. And the Lions love those quick passes out there, whether it's to J-Mo, to Khalif, to St. Brown. They use Gibbs out there, and they were just on it. As soon as those passes hit the flats, they were on it. And so what does that tell you? You got to adjust. You got to find ways to hit the middle of the field. It's something I asked running backs coach Scotty Montgomery today, how to unlock Jahmyr Gibbs as a pass catcher. Yeah. I think they need to go find Theo Riddick's tape. Go find those angle routes, those Texas routes that were unstoppable. Yeah. He said you want to get him the ball going forward, upfield, face to the the direction they're going. That's the route.
He seems like a terrific option route guy for me. I mean, not many linebackers in this league are going to be able to stay with him. And to your point about the strategy of playing the flats, I thought Tampa did a great job. When you play that defense, you also have to be able to tackle. And I thought they came up and they tackled really, really well. To your point about getting him faced up, don't get him 3 yards out where he's turning his back to catch the ball. I like those option routes, moving forward, middle of the field. I think when a team does the cover 7 zone, the middle of the field is where you have to attack the seams. And to me, it's Gibbs and it's Laporta. Those are your guys in those seams. I think those are your seam killers, obviously, with Amon-Ra St. Brown.
You look at the one touchdown they did have, right? What did they do? They took Laporta and they took St. Brown and kind of ran them to the same depth. And they had to decide which way to go. And they kind of squeezed on Laporta. It opened St. Brown. He caught the ball at the 4, 5, 6 yard line and was able to get down to the 1, setting up first and goal at the 1. I'm going to take this team first and goal at the 1 to get into the end zone 98% of the time. And so, when you're first and 10 at the 11, that's a lot tougher road. Attack the middle of the field, stress them out. You have all these weapons like you talked about. Stress them, find the open one. And Jared should be able to get better at that as the season progresses.
Heading into this game, Cardinals 22nd in red zone defense, about 55.6%, but they're number 3 on third down. They've been terrific in that area. So that's kind of when you're in the red zone, that third down is that money down. You've got to get into manageable second and thirds, I think, for the Lions too. Too many times, second 9, second 11, second 12. Now you're limited in the red zone. One, it takes the run game away. They got to be much better on first down in the red zone. I think that's going to be a big key too.
Well, it certainly showed up late in that game, right? I mean, a lot of those third and longs in the red zone were in the third and fourth quarter, and they're trying to execute a comeback. They didn't have the ability to kick a field goal to tie it, so it really killed them.
All right, let's get to our number 2 big key, and it's to me it's going to be containing Kyler Murray and that offense, but Murray especially. You look at what he did last week. He was only the second player in NFL history, and I thought this was a crazy statistic, to have 200 passing yards, at least 50 rushing, and a perfect passer rating. It's happened 2 times in the history of the NFL. And he was one of them. He was that good last week. Now, look, last week, Baker Mayfield was able to escape the pocket, make some plays with his feet. Did so more as a passer, though he did have the one rushing touchdown, but that was more of a design draw, I think, the design run. That's going to happen. Look, guys are going to make plays, and Kyler's going to get out, and he's going to make plays. Yeah. You just have to know going in that that's going to happen. To me, it's limiting the big plays. Don't let that become something that comes over the top or happen too many times where it affects the ball game.
I think this is an area where the Lions' scheme works in their favor. What do we see a lot on first downs? We see 5 down, right? So you've got more bodies across. Not only do you see 5 down, you see massive guys in Davenport, in Hutchinson, in Reeder, in McNeil. You got a 315-pound Levi Onwuzurike playing defensive end. So you have the lanes clogged on the inside. You have athleticism on the outside. That gives you a shot before the snap. Now, once the ball is snapped, the key is don't run past the freaking quarterback. And it's really, really hard because so many of those sacks come from the loop, from running the hoop, from getting behind, from catching the quarterback off guard. And the young players struggle with it the most, right? And I actually saw a play from Hutchinson, his final sack, the one he split with Levi, that showed to me his growth as a young player. That one, Aleem penetrated. Baker read it, tried to step forward, and you saw Aiden recognizing it early. His eyes were up, his head was up as he was bull rushing, and he took that little step back and he closed down the lane, and it led to a sack. You can't get past. If you get past Kyler, you're not recovering. I mean, he is just one of the absolute fastest quarterbacks, and it's not just fast, it's that lateral quickness, that ability to change directions. It's so rare, and he's not even looking to run most of the time. I think that's what makes him so impressive is he's keeping his eyes downfield. He wants to throw the ball. I think that touchdown last week against the Rams, he makes 4 guys miss in the backfield, scrambling hard to his left, and he finds the tight end in the back of the end zone for an 18-yard touchdown. He's killing teams with his arm more than he's killing them with their feet, but that ability to extend that play makes him even more lethal.
That's the key. When you extend, now all of a sudden routes come off cycle there, and guys look to make plays. Now he's got that weapon deep in Marvin Harrison Jr. To hit the home run when he extend those plays. So to your point, I think he's evolved a little bit. Instead of before, he would just run, pick up what he could, and do that. Now he's looking for the big play, the breakdown of the defense. That's where Detroit's got to be sound. And look, this is a Cardinals offense that's humming right now. 69 points in 2 games, 8 touchdowns, 4 field goals, 355 rushing yards, 42 first downs. I mean, they are rolling right now. I thought Detroit's defense played much better week 2 against the Bucs. You look at some of those statistics, and they dominated that game for the most part. There were just a couple plays here and there where the Bucs beat them on, but I think that's a great matchup going into this game. But that, to me, is the key for this Lions defense. Don't let Kyler ruin it for you.
Yeah, and, I mean, you bring up Marvin Harrison. I mean, good night. I mean, you knew he was going to be good if you watched him in college, right? I'm just skipping right to point 3.
No. Our third key is 2 rookies we think that are going to be pretty big in this contest for either side, and that's Marvin Harrison Jr. for the Cardinals and Terrion Arnold for the Detroit Lions. Go ahead on Marvin Harrison.
Prototypical frame,
yeah,
right? 6'3", 200 and change. Elite athleticism, elite hands, and then the feel that you can't teach. And the play I look at from that Rams game last week, he was running a deep cross and kind of got undercut by the safety. And what does he do? Just turns it upfield. Like, that's a veteran move to think that I can go off schedule on my route and my quarterback will figure it out because he's smart. He's a veteran now, and it resulted in a, I don't know how many yards, 60-plus yard touchdown. The post route he ran to the end zone, he had an inch to make that play happen. He hauls it in, he gets the toes down. I mean, he is exceptional, and the Lions are going to have their hands full. I think it's always important to prevent big plays as much as possible. Don't let him pass you. I mean, I know you have really good playmakers in the back end in Brian Branch and Kirby Joseph, and Arnold's got the speed to keep up with him, and Davis has the physicality to keep up with him, but just don't let him behind you, because he will make every one of those guys pay because he's that good, even though he has 2 games of experience under his belt.
And I thought it was really mature by him too to come out after that game. Caught 4 balls for 130 yards, 2 touchdowns. Kyler Murray, I think, was 17-21 in that game. The 4 incompletions were to Marvin Harrison, and that young man, after the game, was asked about his performance, obviously breakout game in the NFL, and he said, yeah, but those 4 incompletions that Kyler had, they were all to me. I can't have that. Just to have that presence of mind in that moment, it speaks to his maturity. And you're right, he is a big play waiting to happen. You got to like Branch and Kirby back there. I think that's a terrific safety duo, and those guys get their hands on footballs and make plays, but don't put yourself in that situation where you've got to do that, because Marvin Harrison Jr. is really, really good. I want to get your opinion on what you thought of the first 2 weeks of Terrion Arnold. I thought he's played pretty well. They've thrown at him 13 times, completed 11 of those for 129 yards and a touchdown. You look at those numbers, that's a 133 rating, and you're like, a lot of those dinks and dunks, So, and that's going to happen. The 3 pass interference penalties, tic-tac maybe a little bit, also has a face mask in there, maybe a little bit up and down his first 2 games. What have you thought of the rookie?
I was laughing at the thought today because he's probably going to have a club on that finger, and I'm thinking might not be the worst thing in the world to not have a hand to grab, right? Because that is the hardest thing for young quarterbacks to come to this league. College football lets you be a little bit more physical.
Way different.
I think it's a better game, honestly, in that facet of it. I don't like the spot foul. I don't know what the compromise is, but to think that he got a 41-yard penalty for that, it felt like the crime and the punishment were not
I think it's when he got up around the head. That's probably what did it for me. I think the hand fighting between both guys was okay, but once he got the hand up around the head, that's what probably did it for the official.
I would say none of the calls surprised me because that's just how they officiate in this league, and young cornerbacks have to learn that. You have to play with your feet more than your hands. You have to play the ball more than the man. Yeah. Those are the two most fundamental rules for a cornerback in this league. I think he's got the mentality. I think he's got the physical skill set. I love the way he tackles in the open field. I think his man coverage skills have looked better than his zone coverage skills. I think he's still finding a feel for how the route concepts work. Kupp and Evans both beat him on deep curls as he was a deep cover 3 defender. On the touchdown to Godwin, the 41-yarder, he abandoned his zone, got sucked into defending a post, and now you got Kirby and Terran Arnold overlapping while Godwin just runs the wheel and he's all alone. So that'll come with time, right? That is an experience thing. You need to see it. You need to process it. You need to understand it. He's not stupid, right? I mean, he's an intelligent football player. He's got a high football IQ. He's driven. And so I think it's just a matter of just rep. And these are going to be so valuable that he's taking his licks now. By the time the end of the season rolls around, and certainly 2025, like, he should be a pretty darn good player, a legit high-end 2, low-end 1 by his second season.
Yeah, I think there's no worry with this football team with him. When you watch the tape, he's there. If you're getting beat, that's one thing. If you're just not getting it mentally, that's one thing. But he's in position. I think it's just technique. It's little tiny things that he's got to clean up, like you talked about. Play the ball more than the man, and he'll figure that stuff up. I'm not worried about him at all. I think he's going to be a really good player.
No, the other thing I'm really curious about in this game is their run game, right? Like we talk about Murray.
Yeah.
James Conner is David Montgomery. I mean, they're very similar styles. They have some differences to them, but just a really fundamentally sound between the tackles runner, averages 4.6 yards per carry. I imagine that Murray's threat of running probably creates some spacing for him to take advantage of, but look, the Lions are a very good run defense. That's going to benefit them. I felt like by the end of last week, the Bucs weren't even trying to run up the middle. They were trying some gadget runs around the perimeter because DJ Reader stepped in, and suddenly there was nowhere to go, right? Yeah. Again, we talk about that beef in the middle with McNeil and Levi, and once Davenport gets folded back into the mix, like, they're going to be very, very tough to run against. But you can't sleep on Connor. You got to make sure you're shutting down those run lanes.
Yeah, 2 other big ones for me. It'll be fun to see all 5 of those guys on the defensive front together for the first time. Sure. Marcus Davenport was back at practice this week. He missed last week with a groin injury. Good to see him back on the practice field, and just what those 5 guys can do together, I think will be pretty fun to watch. And then what kind of game plan do they have for Budda Baker too? I mean, that guy, I know you asked a couple questions on Wednesday to Dan and some of the assistant coaches, but when you watch the film of that game versus the Rams, I mean, he's everywhere.
He's a missile.
He comes up and attacks the run game, and you've got to have a plan for him if you're going to run the football.
I love great safety play. It's like one of my favorite things to watch in football. It's why I have such a great appreciation for Brian Branch. I think Brian Branch is already a very good football player, right? I think Budda Baker is what you hope he becomes, right? That ability to fire downhill with such confidence. He had, I think, 2 or 3 tackles for loss, and he doesn't get touched. Right. He just shoots down from 10 yards deep with just this. He knows what he's doing. He has a plan of attack, and they can't seem to stop him. And so, yeah, it was.
And offensive linemen don't really plan for that.
You don't
plan to block a safety typically, but you have to.
It's almost like marking the middle linebacker, right? Like, you got to mark where he is on the field because he's a problem.
So it'll be a fun one. First one on the road for Lions. Something tells me a little bit needed. This is a team that kind of likes going on the road, likes that, us versus everybody mentality. You need a big win. I think it fits this team's personality to go on the road and try to get one, but it won't be easy. That's a good football team playing good ball, and this is a big one week 3, right?
Well, they put up 41 points last week?
41.
It is not the game you thought it was when the schedule came out, that's for sure.
We'll end it on
Kyler's
that.
Back.
Welcome back to the Twentyman Huddle podcast presented by Microsoft. I am very happy to welcome in a man who has been described as one of the best defensive line coaches. Before we get into football, we've got to talk about Taj, your son. Quite the hockey player. I know that's close to my heart because my son grew up in Detroit playing travel hockey, now plays varsity for Bloomfield Hills. But How's he doing so far?
He's
How's
doing-
he liking
he's-
it up
he's
here?
doing great.
I know
I
that
mean,
was part
he's-
of the reason you guys kind of came up here.
A huge part, yeah. He's playing for CompuWare.
Nice. Good program.
Playing AAA hockey there and doing a great job. And now he's also playing football and hockey, which we couldn't keep him away from football. But hockey's his love, and he's playing defenseman and he's checking guys when he's not supposed to check at 12 years
At 12,
old.
so they're hitting. Is it this year or next year?
It's at 13.
13 they start. Yeah,
they're still a year away, but
this is the year though where it's important. They'll start coaching it now. You'll practice it because you've got to. It can't just be that hard adjustment.
But
to all of a
playing
sudden
football for him actually helps him as far as
yeah.
He's a running back and linebacker, so he's okay.
I love it. So your first impressions of Detroit hockey versus Nashville hockey at the youth level?
You know what? It is completely different. I thought they did a good job in Nashville for what they had, but there's so many teams here that are, it's really competitive.
Yeah.
Really competitive. And, I think they do a good job with development because there's ice on two sheets of ice in every neighborhood. So it's a lot different now.
All right, let's get to football a little bit. Last week, obviously, a tough loss, but you can look at your unit, the performance up front, how they limited the run, got after Baker Mayfield, and obviously Hutch with the 4.5 sacks. You've seen a lot of great performances over the years. Have you ever been a part of one like that? And you were with Von Miller, I think, over at Texas A&M, right? Obviously, had some great guys at Tennessee, but have you ever seen an individual performance like you saw from Hutch?
What's funny is I think it was Wednesday of last week, I don't know why it popped in my head, but I was telling Hutch a story about when in Dan's first game when he took over in Miami, we played the Tennessee Titans, and Cam Wake had 3 sacks in the first half. Actually had 4 in the first half of the game, and we kind of laughed about that story, and it was unbelievable. But then when he got to 3, I said, hell, maybe you can you can be the next guy to do it. But the thing is he does so much more than the stats. He does a good or the sacks and all of that. He does a good job of setting up the pass rush games and calling it, and he's been a great leader for us. But really the whole group, Hutch is not getting those sacks without the help of those guys on the interior, and he'll admit that himself. So it's all of us working together. But as far as Hutch as a player, I told the guys, I think, I've had some hard workers. I've had Sue and Jeff Simmons, but the hardest worker that I've ever been around is actually another Michigan Wolverine, which is Charles Woodson in Oakland. Like he just worked his butt off, even when he was older. And Hutch is kind of the same type of guy. Like he wants to get the perfect reps in practice and work his butt off. So it's good to see everything paying off.
I think Lions fans will be all right if Hutch ends up having the same career as Charles Woodson had. But what marvels me about Hutch is not only he plays 90% of the snaps, and he's got a motor that never quits. So not only does he play that many snaps, but he never takes plays off either. And I think that's a unique combination amongst big guys too.
Yeah. And he wants to take every practice rep and every one-on-one pass rush rep. And I always tell him, like, I'll pull him out of practice and say he wants to go. And it's like, you know what? I got to protect you from you. Like, you can't take every rep. But that's why he's a good player and becoming a great player, is because he works at it. So it doesn't just happen. You don't see very many great players that are just great. Usually there's a work ethic behind it.
How great was it to see DJ Reader in the middle there? Got, I think, 25 snaps, somewhere right in there. Made an impact. And I think some people, you obviously see him as a big guy, a run stuffer, but I think people sleep a little bit on his athleticism. There were a couple plays where he came real close to having some sacks. I think he can influence the pass rush as well. What'd you like from his debut? Elite
run defender. He's always kind of been that. But like you said, he affects the quarterback. And I think sometimes fans will look at a stat sheet and then they form their opinions based on the stat sheet. You can't tell me that the people that are watching a game, they're locked in on the nose guard. Like they're not looking at that. But the things that he does impacts the game in so many ways. Like, he's pushing the pocket, forcing the quarterback to move left, move right, step back, and then now the other guys go clean him up. But like you said, he's a much better pass rusher than what he gets credit for.
That's some serious beef you got in the middle there now with Aleem.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
And those two are just going to continue to get better. I mean, obviously they hadn't had a lot of time on task. You know, DJ was out all training camp, and you've got to learn the guy next to you a little bit, especially on the defensive line when you're doing stunts and doing some of the other games that you play and stuff like that. It's just going to keep getting better and better.
You know, their first time, Aleem and Reeder, their first time really practicing or playing together in pads was in that game, the against Tampa. Like, they really didn't have a chance to practice because Reeder wasn't practicing. Then when we brought him back, it was return to play, so he was kind of on the scout team. And then when we came back, we didn't have pads on. So their first time being in pads together was in that game against Tampa. And we still haven't had in a game yet Hutch, Mac, Davenport, and Levi, and all those guys in there together. And so I'm looking forward to see what that looks like.
Are you cheating? Are you looking at my questions here? Because my next one was getting all 5 players back together. How excited are you for that? You just mentioned
very
it,
excited.
especially with the way Marcus played week 1 too. I thought that was very underrated. What he did on that other side and getting that back.
From what he did, and that opener from just a physicality standpoint, and I think it opened. Even the DBs were talking about what he was able to do, and those guys enjoy working together. Like, we sit in the meeting room and you listen to them talk, and they talk about the game and how we want to play the game, and it's an impressive group, you know. So we're excited to get all of them out there. And I mean, even Wingo, like Dan and AG challenged us to get better from week 1 to week 2, and I think that group, along with the football team, was able to get better. I know we didn't win the football game, but you can see the improvement, and that's really what you're trying to get to. I mean, I don't know how many playoff games are played in September, but you know, we're just getting better and better and better every week. That's what we're looking for.
I like the line you used. I think you said it's crushing the can on the edge when you have Marcus and Aiden in there, and then now you add Reeder and Aleem inside, and that's going to be important this week because what do you see on tape? Obviously, Kyler Murray is a guy who's made plays with his legs outside the pocket a lot. He's got a weapon in Marvis Harrison Jr. on the outside that can be real dangerous if he's allowed to extend some plays. Just the challenge this week facing Kyler.
Scary football player. I mean, he was Levi's teammate at Allen High School in Texas, and he's been doing that since high school, running around. Even when you think you got him boxed in, he's still able to slither around and make some plays. So it's going to be a challenge for us. But you know, we're going to go after him and attack him and do those things. So it'll be a good challenge for us, and it'll be a good challenge for him the way we're going to rush the passer.
You've mentioned Levi a couple of times. I know you weren't here when he first got here when he was dealing with his back injury, nearly ended his career, Terrell. Just how happy are you for what he's become now he's healthy, and what he's doing and how he's played the first 2 weeks? He's a big part of what you guys have done up front.
I spent so much time with Levi in the draft process when he was coming out, and I begged and hoped that we would take him in Tennessee to pair him with Jeff Simmons inside, and we didn't. And it's funny because now we come together, and I watched him from afar and would hear the stories. And when I first got here, I said, you know what? You got a chance to change the narrative. And he's been able to do that in a major way. And he's healthy. Like, that's the biggest thing. I mean, we want to call kids busts, and some guys just develop at a different rate, and other guys, you can't judge them when they're hurt, you know. And
a back is a back. Like, that's a finicky thing. That's a serious injury.
At that position, if you have a bad back, I don't know how you do it. So the fact that he's been able to overcome that and he's playing at such a high level for us is exciting to see, man.
Any of the young guys excite you a little bit?
Wingo, like Wingo's coming. Like, I thought last week, again, in a loss, he looked better than he did at any point in the preseason. And that's a good thing for us. I mean, Pascal's another guy that's a third-year player that is really fighting for play. The thing that we have is we have a lot of depth on our interior, and that's such a huge thing because, guys get banged up. Well, you can just throw another guy in there. Yeah, it's going to happen. But those two guys are the ones that come to mind for me as far as guys that you can see getting better. And again, we're just trying to improve every week, and hopefully we could take another step this week.
Well, that defensive line took a big step last week. I think it's going to be the catalyst for what you guys do defensively. I think you guys have those guys playing. I think you have those guys playing at a really high level up front. It should be a great test this week. Thanks so much for joining me. I love the insight, talking big boy football inside there. Doesn't get the play a lot of the times that it does, but I love the conversation. Thanks for joining me. Appreciate you, Derek.
Absolutely.
Welcome back to the Twentyman the Huddle podcast presented by Microsoft, and I am very happy to welcome in Darren Urban. He does a great job covering everything over in Arizona for the Cardinals. He's the director of editorial content and the senior writer for the Arizona Cardinals. Darren, thanks for joining me. Appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks for inviting me, Tim.
Well, it's another fun matchup, right? NFC matchup. We'll see what kind of implications this has later in the season, but a big one early on. Cardinals are obviously coming off a big win against the Rams last week after dropping their Week 1 contest. The Lions, the other side of it, won a close game Week 1, but fell short last week, so they're looking for a bounce back. But let's start with this, Darren. Have you ever seen a quarterback play as well as Kyler Murray played last week? What was it? 266 passing yards, 59 rushing, a perfect passer rating. Have you ever seen anything like it?
It's funny that you bring that up in the podcast that I do here for the site. We were just having that conversation, and I guess it depends. There's nuance there. Statistically, probably not. Efficiency, probably not. He did out of a game in Las Vegas in 2022. He wasn't great some of the game, but the team was terrible. And he basically put the team on his back that day and ran for a touchdown, threw for a touchdown, ran for a 2-point conversion, threw for a 2-point conversion. I don't know if you remember that one, but it's the one where he had scrambled for 20 seconds before he ran in the 2-pointer.
Oh, yeah.
His stats weren't great that day, but that was a game that only Kyler Murray could do. That was something similar in terms of what we saw Sunday. The difference between this Kyler Murray and previous versions is that you're now adding in the playmaking into a situation where the offense fits him, and it is very effective within the offense. It's not asking for him to do everything, and you've seen it with the running game. Now you see it with Marvin Harrison and Trey McBride that they've got some guys to throw to. It can be a very efficient offense, and I think as he kind of comes into his own with his coaching staff full time after missing half the year last year, you're really being able to see the results.
And it really does look like it fits, Darren. I mean, 69 points, 8 touchdowns, 759 yards, 355 rushing, 42 first downs. I mean, they can attack you in a lot more ways than I think previous years with Kyler. And I think one of the big things when watching his game from last week too is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but he looks like he's at a point now where he's scrambling, he's moving, he's using his legs to throw the ball downfield, not so much gain yards with his legs. And I think that's opened up this offense a lot too when you put a playmaker like Marvin Harrison Jr. on the outside.
Well, yes, that is all true. And it's what you hope for if you have a quarterback who can move like Kyler Murray. And I'm sure this would go with any quarterback who's able to scramble and buy some time. You need to have receivers that can complement that, because if the defense is worried about that quarterback getting out and maybe heading up the field by himself, you have situations like last week where Marvin Harrison ends up running free in the secondary multiple times. Now, I'm not saying that that's going to happen every week. The Rams definitely got messed up a couple of times on defense last week. But because you've got a McBride, like a great example is the 60-yard touchdown to Harrison. That play was a rollout, a play action rollout to the right that was going to go back across the field to Trey McBride. 3 Rams defenders went to McBride, and a 4th was coming over to help. And that's the guy that kind of rubbed off Harrison, and Harrison kind of ran past him, and he got past the corner and got wide open. If you can start using those pieces that aren't getting the ball on a particular play to draw defenders, that's where you get all this openness. And that goes back to, again, the threat of Kyler running the play action. Not only did you worry about James Conner, the initial part of that play, then all of a sudden Kyler is running. And even if he hadn't thrown that ball, he would have gained 10 or 15 yards if he decided to run because of where the defense was. I mean, they have so many options right now. This Drew Petzing offense looks really good.
Yeah, and defensively, they're playing some pretty good football, too. To hold Matthew Stafford and that collection of weapons over there to 10 points is pretty good. And it was playing behind the line of scrimmage, playing on Los Angeles side. I think it was 12 tackles for loss, 5 sacks. I mean, that was a pretty good performance, too. But they've been playing some pretty good football to start this side. That front 7, is that their strength particularly? We all know about Budda Baker, obviously, and the impact that he has at safety. But how good is that front 7 playing right now?
They had a great game last week, and you certainly don't want to throw a bunch of cold water on it. But the Rams were missing Puka Nacua. They lost Cooper Kupp by the end of the first half, and they were missing 3 starting offensive linemen. That makes a difference, especially when you're about to go against a Lions team that has arguably the best offensive line in the league, and they're all healthy. So we'll see how it carries over. But I do think that this defense plays hard. I think Nick Rollis, the defensive coordinator, does a nice job putting them in the positions they need to do to be as successful as they can. I think ultimately what's going to determine the wins and losses of this team is going to be, can the defense do enough to keep their offense in a position where if they play offensively like they can, you're basically outscoring teams. I don't expect this defense to hold teams to 10 points a week, but at the same time, maybe you're running into a Lions. I mean, the Lions had a ton of yards last week, couldn't quite finish off drives. That would be something that would play into a strength of a Cardinals defense, a kind of a bend but not break, and then kind of let the offense take over.
I'm sure everybody in Arizona was excited to see kind of that breakout game from Marvin Harrison Jr. Just how good can he be, Darren?
I mean, he can be what everybody thinks he can be. I mean, the first week was an anomaly. I do think there was a lot of things that went into it. It was windy in Buffalo, so I think that affected some things. Buffalo did do some things to cover him better, but ultimately, I think it was time on task that Kyler and Marvin hadn't had because neither one of them really played in the preseason. And it's, you've been doing this long enough, Tim. The first week or two in the NFL, there's so many times where we go back and we look how a team did in week 1 or week 2, and you're thinking this had nothing to do with how they were the rest of the season. So that's why I'm hesitant on a lot of stuff, but they were still trying to figure out Marvin Harrison. Teams are going to pay attention to him. He is the number 1 receiver for this team. He's going to be the number 1 receiver. The issue, again, defenses are going to have is, okay, if you put a lot of stock in worrying about him all the time, Trey McBride is really good. And Michael Wilson, who's kind of under the radar, can do some things. And oh, by the way, this running game since the end of last year can really grind up a lot of yards. So, they've gotten to the point where they have enough options that even if the other team looks at Marvin, there are going to be some things that they're going to have to pay for. That all said, I think Marvin Harrison's definitely going to be the real deal. And, is he going to have a Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson rookie season in terms of stats? I don't know about that, but in terms of impact, I think he can.
I'm glad you mentioned the run game. James Conner, obviously, terrific player. Dan Campbell had a great line this week when asked him, he said he runs heavy. I thought that was a great way to describe him because he does bring the thunder. Injury concerns, Darren, leading into this one, stuff that you're watching over there. Everybody come out of Sunday okay, or there's some concerns there leading into this week?
The biggest injury issues that they have are guys that are already on IR. In terms of the guys that have been playing, they're relatively healthy. That's why Gannon didn't play anybody in the preseason, and so far it's paid off. The guys that got hurt were practice injuries, but nobody got hurt in preseason, and they've stayed healthy at this point. So you knock on wood, and as we can see around the league, Tim, I mean, injuries are already playing a huge factor in how some teams are going to go. In this team's division alone, Obviously, the Cardinals just played the Rams. The 49ers are a team that are already beat up. So that's a huge part of this is can teams stay healthy? And right now the Cardinals are.
One or two big keys for the Cardinals to come away with a victory at State Farm on Sunday against this Lions team. That's obviously it's a big game for them coming off a loss. You don't want to start 1-2.
Yeah, well, and I think for both teams it's a huge deal. The number one thing I'm thinking is you can't let Hutchinson ruin the game if you're the Cardinals. I think you have a good enough run game where you can potentially keep them off balance, but your passing game was so efficient last week, but you did not see a pass rusher like the Lions have in Hutchinson. And I think the other thing defensively, you just got to be smart. I don't know if you're going to necessarily hold the Lions down like you held down the Rams, but if you can out-physical the Lions, and I think the Lions are one of the most physical teams the Cardinals will see, and that's where the Cardinals are right now. Gannon is a physical type of coach, and he's built a physical type team. I'm looking forward to that, but you can't let the Lions gash you on the ground.
It should be a good one. Two physical football teams, two teams that like to run the ball, that two defenses that are playing much better than we've seen in years past too, and it's a big NFC matchup. It should be a great one. Darren, thank you so much for taking the time. Appreciate you, and I'll come over and say hello in the press box on Sunday.
Thanks for having me, Tim.